Hey guys, welcome to another video. If you're new here, I'm Kelly. In today's video, we are taking a little walk down memory lane in this special Flashback Friday video. So a memory came up on my Instagram from 2016, and it was a thumbnail picture, I think, from a video that I created titled Makeup Collection Eyeshadows. And apparently, November 12th, 2016, I filmed an eyeshadow collection for you guys, and I talked about all of the eyeshadows that I was using, that I was loving, that I had in my collection. And I posted that memory on my Instagram, and I asked you guys if you would be interested in an update video. Do you want to know what I have since decluttered and what is still in my collection? And you said yes. So that is what we are here to talk about. I will include the original video right here in case you want to hear about all of these each individual palettes. But why don't we go ahead and jump into the video. The very first eyeshadow palette that I mentioned, I actually didn't have in my collection at the time anymore, but it was a recent declutter. It was my very first high-end purchase, and it was the Too Faced Natural Eye Palette. Now I'm going to try to find a picture and insert it right here, but I don't even know if they still make this eyeshadow palette anymore, if I'm being honest. I think that after I got that palette, they like repackaged it, they reformulated it, and it looked different. And then I haven't really paid attention to see if it's still around anymore. I purchased this, gosh, it had to be maybe like 2011, 2012, shortly after moving to Texas, and I moved to Texas in the fall of 2010. I got so much use out of this eyeshadow palette. It was my first high-end purchase. I purchased it because a friend of mine at the time had that eyeshadow palette. She used it every single day. I think I panned like multiple eyeshadow shades, and I wish that for nostalgia purposes, I kept it and I held on to it. But I didn't. I ended up decluttering it before I even filmed this video in 2016, but it was a great beginner palette for me. The next palette that I featured was the Urban Decay Naked palette, the original Naked palette. Now I no longer have that in my collection, and the reason is, you know, before I purchased that palette, I had just gotten into YouTube. There was the Naked 1, the Naked 2, and the Naked 3. Those were the only Nakeds at the time, and I kind of did my research to see which palette fit me because it was a $50 palette, so it was super expensive. It was going to be my second large eyeshadow purchase, and so after doing some research, I thought the Naked palette would be a good one for me, and I did like it, and I did get a lot of use out of it, but as my collection grew, I found that I wasn't using that eyeshadow palette and that it just sat in my collection. I did really like the gold shade. I can't remember the name of it, so I will look it up and type it on the screen, but there was a gold shade that I went into and used time and time again, and that is actually an Urban Decay single eyeshadow, so I would love to pick that up, but I mean their singles are $20, so it's definitely not something that I'm jumping at the bit to get, but I got a lot of use out of that palette. However, it just, you know, it didn't last. In the long run, it didn't last in my collection. I also had both the Lorac Pro 1 and the Lorac Pro 2 eyeshadow palettes. I think I hit pan in both of those. I did like the Lorac Pro 2 better. I actually went on to declutter the Lorac Pro 1 first, followed by the Lorac Pro 2 years later. And again, the reason being, I just found that as my collection grew, I didn't get a ton of use out of them. I really liked traveling with those palettes. They were nice and thin. It was easy to pack them up in my bag. They didn't take up a lot of space. And like I said, I hit pan, I think only on one shade in the Lorac Pro 1, but in the Lorac Pro 2, I think I hit pan on 2 shades, and I was close to hitting pan on 2 more. But just my collection grew, and I wasn't getting use out of them, so I kicked them to the curb. I also had the Morphe Jaclyn Hill Favorites collab. The very first collab that Morphe and Jaclyn Hill did together, it came out in black packaging, and Jaclyn did not create any of those shadows. She just simply picked out her favorites from Morphe and put them all into one palette. Now I know that that collab was like a huge hit in the YouTube world. I went on to do several looks on my Instagram. I think I might have even done a giveaway on that palette, and I did really enjoy it. I have since decluttered it, and I don't really even know why. I do have the Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette, the white one, I guess I could grab it for you. Okay, so I do currently have this one in my collection. This is the second collab that they did, but the first palette where Jaclyn actually created the eyeshadows herself. So these were all new shades. She did come up with names for all of them, and they're on this little sheet that I have held on to because otherwise it's just a ton of palettes and you don't know the shade names. And I do really like this palette. I know that Morphe and Jaclyn are like hot topics right now. People are like take it or leave it. A lot of people are over it, but I do really like this eyeshadow palette. Then I went on to talk about the Violet Voss times Laura Lee collab. This was before the days of Laura Lee having her own makeup brand, which, is she even releasing anything with her makeup brand? But this was before that. When Violet Voss came out onto the scene, I went back and forth between their Holy Grail palette, which I think they still have that one, and the collab that they did with Laura Lee. I ended up picking up the collab with Laura Lee and I loved it. I no longer have it in my collection, but I did get a ton of use out of that one. I just found that that wasn't a palette that I reached for often. Although I thought the shades were beautiful, I often had to talk myself into using it. And I think one of the eyeshadow shades that caught my eye was that Yoshi shade. It was like this beautiful green shade, if I'm remembering correctly. That was one of the shades that caught my eye, but it wasn't one that I was using often. And I find that that still happens to me. There will be a shade or two that catches my eye, and then it doesn't end up being one that I use a ton. But I got a lot of use out of that. However, it has moved on from my collection. I went on to purchase the BH Cosmetics times Carli Bybel palette. Now in this original video that I'm talking about, I only had her first collab with them. She went on to do a second collab, and it was like that palette, but more shades, which I purchased also. And if I have any videos using any of these eyeshadows, I'll link them all in the comments down below because I know that I did reviews on the Carli Bybel BH palette. Now here's the thing. A lot of people loved that eyeshadow palette, and I really like Carli Bybel. But for me, the eyeshadow palette did not work. I got like no pigmentation when I was using that eyeshadow palette. I remember one of the first times I used it, I created an eye look, I took a picture of it, sent it to my friend Smags, and she was like, I can't really see your eyeshadow. Can you like, you know, add some more? I tried to add as much eyeshadow as I could, but it still didn't show up. I just felt like the quality wasn't there. I know that's an unpopular opinion. I know a ton of people loved that palette. Samantha March raved about those two Carli Bybel BH palettes, but for me, the quality wasn't there. I felt like Violet Voss, Morphe, Lorac, Urban Decay, they all had much better formulas than BH at the time. Now I don't currently have any BH eyeshadows in my collection, but I do know that my friend Heather Austin has been raving about BH. I know Karen Harris, Angelica Nyquist, Kara C, Britt Clark, they've all been using BH and raving about it. But at the time back then, I was not a huge fan. I do have a few Anastasia Beverly Hills eyeshadow palettes in my collection. One that is no longer was the Anastasia Beverly Hills Shadow Couture World Traveler palette. Now I purchased that palette specifically for the very bold royal blue shade that was in that palette. And I probably created a few looks with it. I really liked the, what is it called? Pink Champagne. I really liked the pink champagne that's in there. I think you can get it as a single, and I actually had a single of that eyeshadow, but then I think when I got the World Traveler palette, I decluttered the single eyeshadow, and now I have since decluttered that palette, so I no longer have Pink Champagne, although that is a beautiful shade. I didn't really get rid of this for any good reason, if I'm being honest. I had it for a while, I loved it, I liked the ABH formula, I got good pigmentation out of the shadows. I think I even hit pan on a shade or two, and then just for whatever reason I got rid of it. I don't even remember why. It wasn't a bad palette, I really liked it. I think maybe I got rid of it because it was limited edition. This was back, I mean, I know she still does it, but this was back when like every single release that Anastasia came out with was limited edition and it disappeared. So maybe that's why I got rid of it. I don't remember. I also had the Laura Mercier Artist 2 palette. This one was another one where I think it was limited edition when it first came out, and then it became permanent, and it had that beautiful African violet shade, which I think you could also get as a single for Laura Mercier. I got a ton of use out of this eyeshadow palette. They were purples. I'm wearing purples today. I created some really nice looks with that eyeshadow palette. I think I hit pan on a shade or two. I came close on another one, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly. The reason why I got rid of it, I remember why I got rid of this one. Around the time when I was using that palette, it wasn't new to me, but I was using it more and more. I started to get eczema on my eyelids, and I didn't know what was causing the eczema. I didn't know if it was my MAC paint pot, so I stopped using that and I switched to the Urban Decay eyeshadow primers. Or I thought perhaps it was the Laura Mercier palette because I had had that palette in my collection for a while. So I think that's why I got rid of it, because maybe I had had it for a year or two when the eczema started on my eyelids, thought it was perhaps the eyeshadow palette, stopped using it, got rid of it, but the eczema on my eyes has never gone away. That's actually a palette that I still wish I had in my collection. Looking back at any of these, I wish I kept the Too Faced Natural Eye just because it was my very first palette. But I do wish that I still had the Laura Mercier one because I really created some beautiful looks out of that eyeshadow palette. I'm okay with getting rid of all of the others, but those two I wish I still had. Now, we're gonna get into some eyeshadows that are still in my collection. You were probably wondering, Kelly, did you keep anything from 4 years ago? I did. The first is the Master Palette by Mario. Now here's the funny story. I talk about the Master Palette by Mario in this video, and I actually had that palette in my possession. Then I went on to say that I ordered the ABH Modern Renaissance palette and it was on its way to me. And the reason why I say that's funny is because if you had asked me which palette I had first, I thought that I had Modern Renaissance first. I even did the eyeshadow wardrobe tag, and I said that this was the oldest palette in my collection, but after watching this video, that's not true. It was this one. Now this Master Palette by Mario was a limited edition because it was a collab, and I'm so glad that I got my hands on it. I know I was just talking to my friend Cara C, and she was saying that this is like the palette that got away from her, but this Bronx shade was the one that like drew me in. I really like this palette. I have it in a project pan right now because I wanted to pan Fifth Avenue and Marina. These shades are a little deep for my skin tone, so I typically mix this eyeshadow palette with the ABH Modern Renaissance, but I do really love this eyeshadow palette and I'm holding on to it. I do not foresee myself getting rid of it anytime soon, and I definitely will not be getting rid of the Modern Renaissance palette. This, if I had to pick one eyeshadow palette in my collection that is a holy grail, I would say this is it for me. As you can see, this palette has been around since 2016. I hit pan on Vermeer and Tempera. I'm close to hitting pan on Primavera. I really like to use this Bon Fresco shade in the crease and then use the Marina shade from the Master Palette by Mario. But this is just like, this is the palette that I reach for when I don't know what eye look I want to use. So I'm keeping this bad boy around. It is not going anywhere. Then in my 2016 video, I did mention my single eyeshadows. I think I had a quad from Anastasia and then a ton of Makeup Geek eyeshadows. I still have a palette full of the eyeshadows that you saw in that collection video. I have since decluttered. I used to have 2 huge Z palettes, but I have since decluttered some. This is what we're left with. I do think some of these are ABH and most of them are by Makeup Geek. So yeah, this one right here in amber is ABH. I think that one, and is this ABH too? Nope. That might be my only ABH one. Is this guy right here in amber, and then the rest are Makeup Geek. I wish I kept that pink champagne by ABH because it was beautiful, but again, I got rid of the single shadow because I had it in a palette at the time. But that's gonna do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed taking a walk down memory lane, taking a look at 2016 when the times were simpler and we didn't have to wear masks everywhere we went. If you did enjoy this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I did a ranking video in 2019 or 2018, right before my daughter was born. I'll link that right here if you want to see that. I have seen Beaut Bean, Betty Jean, do her ranking the last 10 palettes that she purchased video, and I have purchased several eyeshadow palettes recently, so I will probably do one of those. I've gotten a lot of eyeshadows lately, but if you want to do like a whole nother collection, I can do that. I'm gonna update you on some more of the eyeshadow palettes that are joining my collection in future videos. So definitely make sure you're subscribed so that you can catch up with those videos. If you wanna see this makeup look here, it's coming if it's not already up. I was using the Juvia's Place Nubian Royal palette. So if it's up already, I'll link it here. If it's not, all the more reason to stay tuned and see me put some glitter on my face. But that's gonna do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.